Hi, and welcome to part 3 on this video series of system maintenance. We're talking about multi-stage pure water window cleaning systems. In the first couple of videos, we talked about the various filters and when is the ideal time to change them out. We talked about the pre-filter, the post-filter, the DI, when to refill the cartridge, and of course the mystery of the RO membrane and when is a good time to think about changing that out. Well, this being part 3, we're going to talk about a certain aspect of your system that you probably haven't even thought about if you recently bought a system or you just started using the system. And that is, how does the water get into the system, go through the various filters, and come out? What is the path? How does that all work? And what we're talking about here is really about a series of fittings and tubing. Fittings in order to hook up the water from your tap, fittings and tubings to take it from one filter to the next. Now we're going to use the EcoCart as an example in this particular video. We may even look at the Zero Pure Revolution Max. But what I really want to focus on is not the exact fitting, but what type of fitting that you might find on your systems. Because every manufacturer is going to be different, but they're all going to follow sort of a simple mutual guide across them. You'll always deal with garden fittings, for instance. On the input and the output of a system, it'll always be some kind of a garden fitting. On the input will always be a female fitting, and the output being a male fitting. So anyway, I'm going to take the camera off the tripod here, and I'm going to kind of show you some close-ups. We'll be moving around the system a little bit. Hopefully the camera work won't be too jerky and you won't get motion sickness. Okay, I realize that this video could be very, very detailed, but I don't want you to get bored. So we're going to do a quick, start to finish, how to get through the system, and then I'm going to go into details about the types of threads. So this here is a garden thread. On every system produced in the North American market for use by window cleaners is going to have some kind of a female swivel garden thread. It's a 3/4 inch, and on the output of the system, in this case is the DI, it's going to be a male garden thread, 3/4 inch. This is the only spot on the system where you're going to have what I call garden threads. The input and the output. Everything else is going to be what's referred to as an MPT thread. It's a different spacing. There's MPT threads here, MPT threads there, here, here in the input. So it's very important that you know this, because if you just try to do everything with garden fittings, it's not going to work. So going into the input of the pre-filter, you have an MPT thread on one side and a garden fitting on the other. But in this particular case, they used an extra fitting here, and that's what's called a reducer. Because on this particular housing, it's a 3/4 inch port. That's the hole in the side of the housing. But they needed to get it down to a 1/2 inch. So they used a reducer that went from 3/4 inch on the outside thread to a 1/2 inch inside thread. And then they were able to attach this fitting. We'll take a look at reducers a little bit later. They did the same kind of thing here, a reducer before going into an elbow. And then from the elbows are usually used when you want to direct hosing or tubing into a particular direction. They wanted to direct it that way, so rather than have the hose come out here and be forced over there, they used an elbow. The other side, they put in an MPT threaded push fitting on one side and a push fit on the other. And you'll notice on most systems that they use this kind of hard plastic tubing. In this particular case, it's 1/2 inch. Most systems do use 1/2 inch. On one part of the system here, they actually used a 3/8, but 99 times out of 100, if you take a look at your system, it's going to be using a 1/2 inch type of tubing. So after there, they'll go into an elbow before going deeper into the system. So like I said, I'm not trying to show you exactly what's going to be on your system, but I want to show you what type of fittings you'll often see. Here's another case of an elbow, another elbow. These two fittings here are quite similar to this fitting here, where you have a thread on one side and a push fitting on the other, and again a couple of elbows. Here going into the DI, again we've got an elbow here, but it's brass. We've got that reducer that we talked about before. Again, we've got a threaded push fit on one side and then a regular push fit on the other. That 1/2 inch plastic tubing, plastic elbows. So these are the type of the fittings that you're going to see on your system. It's very important that you take a look at your system and see what kind of fittings you have, and try to make a note somewhere. Maybe you have an app or something, or a notebook that you like to carry around. Make a note of the type of fittings that you have on your systems. Now we're going to take a closer look at the fittings in greater detail. Okay, so here are some fittings that we're going to take a look at in detail. So we talked about the difference in a garden thread and an MPT thread. So like I mentioned, anytime you see the fitting where you're connecting on the input and the output will always be a garden thread if it's a machine made in North America, but all the other threads going in and out of the housings are actually what they call MPT thread. So this would be the output of a DI would be your garden thread. The input to the housing would be an MPT thread. Some cases it'll be a 3/4 inch, some cases it'll be a 1/2 inch. Take a look at your system, see what they're using, maybe make some notes. And also, you might want to visit big box stores and see what kind of these fittings that you can source there. Here's a particular case where we're showing a reducer. We use these fittings, these reducer fittings, on our Hydrosphere booster pumps. Those pumps, for some reason, whatever, they come with a 1-inch port. Not very handy for us here in North America, but we can take this down from a 1-inch down to a 3/4 inch, and then we would put that fitting in there like that. Of course, anytime you connect two of these types of threaded fittings, you're going to want to use plumber's tape. Usually 5 or 6 wraparounds on the thread, more than sufficient. Here's another example of a reducer, but this one being nylon. So sometimes you might go to the big box stores and you can't find a brass or nickel plated or zinc plated reducer. You can always use a nylon. So this is a 3/4 inch down to 1/2 inch before it went into there. So this is the fitting that we put into that particular reducer. In other instances, you might see something like this on the output of a system or a housing. Quite often when you see that, you'll also see some kind of another type of elbow. So this is a regular elbow. This is what they call I think they call it pipe elbow or stem elbow. Not exactly sure, but the way it works like that, this works in place of the tubing. That would actually go in there like that. And again, we talked about elbows. They can redirect the water the way you want it. Now, let's go back over the system here. So let's say, for instance, you had an accident with this system. For some reason, this fitting and this fitting broke, for whatever reason. And you couldn't find this at the big box stores. You couldn't find this at the big box stores. But you could find, plug-in elbow. That's what this is called, plug-in elbow. You could find one of these and you could find one of these. Technically speaking, you could get creative, take this fitting out and replace this fitting there with this elbow, and you actually get the exact same configuration. So this was a 3/4 inch down to 1/2 inch reducer. This would go in there, screw in there, and then this would go onto your tubing. So you don't always have to use the exact replacement fitting, especially if you're just trying to get past that little mishap and get back to work. Here is a garden cap. So the garden cap would go on the output of a 3/4 inch male. So we could cap off the system. We could cap it off here, cap off the DI, cap off below is where the waste is on that. And we could stop the system from leaking water in the vehicle when driving it around. Very handy to have. Big box stores, all the big box stores carry these. Doesn't always look like this. Could be black, could be green, whatever. But it'll have that washer in there. And speaking of washer, you'll want to probably pick up a pack of washers. This is a 12-pack. I think it probably cost me about $8. And these washers go inside here. Anytime you might have a situation where you hook up the garden hose and you start getting water leaks as soon as you turn on the hose, 99 times out of 100 it's because either this is damaged, worn out, or it's missing. Quite often, some people, after a while, rubber shrinks a little bit and that falls out. I'd hate to think that something as simple as that stopped you from working one day. Pick up a pack of these. This is a close-up of the tubing we talked about. It's a hard tubing, very hard to squeeze it, very, very difficult to pinch. The benefit of this particular tubing is that although it's stiff and it's hard to move around, that's why you need elbows and stuff to redirect it, is because this tubing, as you can see, it has pretty thin wall, which means more water can pass through it. If you had this and it was rubber, it was this thin wall thickness, it would just collapse on itself and pinch very easily. You'd have to make it thicker walls, but of course thicker walls mean less water passing through. So this you can usually find at the big box stores too. And I want to talk to you about, let's just see here. You might see on here the logo. It says JG. JG stands for John Guest. You might hear some people refer to certain types of fittings as John Guest fittings. Please be aware that John Guest is a brand name. It's not a type of fitting. So John Guest is popular. You might find it at the big box store by you, but if it doesn't say John Guest, doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to work. You just want to make sure that the threads are right, the size of the push fitting are correct as well. So there you have it, everything you wanted to know about hoses and fittings, but were afraid to ask. Hopefully not too overwhelming, but definitely a video that you might want to refer back to sometime down the road. Just a refresher on how to look at your system and identify what kind of parts you have on it. Very, very important that you get yourself kind of prepared. Nothing worse than you go to a job site and there's something wrong with the system that could have easily been replaced with a $5 part, but it stops you from working. In this particular industry, it's very seasonal, and we want to get as much money earned during the peak of season. But anyway, thanks for watching, and if you have any questions about fittings or anything, feel free to comment, put something in the comment section, and I'll try to help you as best as I can. All right, thanks for watching. Bye for now.